So not only was I surprised at just how many different community-based organizations there are that are advocating for climate action, but I was honestly also very surprised at the level of climate action from cities across the country. I feel so often we're brought into this perception that it's only the large cities that are acting on climate change. It's the cities like Denver, it's the cities like Chicago, Seattle, or New York. But by and large, communities of all shapes and sizes from across the country in states that are oftentimes overlooked are undertaking significant action on climate change. And that's really where I wanted to highlight to increase awareness of the great work that's being done, by and large, driven also by community-based organizations.
Welcome back to How We Change the World podcast. Today, I'm excited to introduce Michael Dexter, someone who's making it easy to engage with climate action at the local level. With a master's in public policy and environmental studies from Columbia University, 6 years at the EPA, and a passion for making a tangible difference, Michael has carved out a pathway for us all to follow. He is the genius behind Climate Herald, an innovative platform that's really transforming our access to and understanding of local government initiatives on climate and sustainability. And Climate Herald is more than a tool, though. It's really more like a bridge connecting us with the heartbeat of our communities and showing us how every single one of us can play an important role in our climate and environmental future. So whether you live in a huge city or a tiny little town or somewhere very rural, Michael's work with Climate Herald illuminates the path for engagement and for meaningful change. So I hope you will come along as we explore Climate Herald in depth and tap Michael's deep well of knowledge on how we as individuals and as communities can step up to the climate challenge before us. Good morning, Michael, and welcome to How We Change the World podcast.
Thank you very much.
We are here today to discuss a very interesting, exciting project, and as I said before, not project, because that's such a small word to encapsulate what you've created, this brainchild called Climate Herald, which is a platform. I guess we'll just start by saying a website, a platform, a tool that just came out last month, I think, right? In February?
Exactly.
This is your brainchild, right? This is your idea? And
Absolutely.
Can you just describe what it is, why you created it, what your mission is with this project?
Sure. So Climate Herald, as you mentioned, has actually been launched now just about a month ago in February 2024. Really, it serves as a platform for community members to look to see how their local government is acting on climate change, including all sorts of different actions, whether it be resolutions, ordinances, climate action plans, resilience reports, you name it. We sort of pull that all together into one comprehensive resource to provide an overview of what a community is doing around climate change, and furthermore, to keep it updated with upcoming information to help encourage civic participation and engagement where possible.
I will just throw in that it is so friendly, so user-friendly, and as I said, I'll talk about my experience, but if you just wanted to know the simplest thing, like, is there anything coming up that I could get involved with, or a march or anything I could attend, a meeting, you could find it there about your own community, right?
Absolutely. We do take a broad approach. So whether it's looking to see a resolution that's in front of, say, a city council or county commission, or even a local survey on how to best inform local planning efforts. There's even opportunities for voluntary participation in sort of voluntary work plans, voluntary groups around planting plants, doing cleanups, whatever it might be. It really does look to advance climate action. We really try to raise awareness of that to encourage and help facilitate local engagement in community actions.
Yeah, and education too, right? Because there's a lot of material in there. If you just don't know anything, you don't know what you don't know, it's a good place to go. Just find out what is happening locally. That's the key, right? Local action.
Exactly.
And why local action? Why are you encouraging people to take local action?
That's a great question. So, in reality, all organizations just about focus on Congress. Many of them also include information around state policy and what is happening at the state level. But very, very few organizations actually really focus on the local level. They might have chapters, local chapters, or groups that are oftentimes working within that organization or supporting that organization. But still, so often, those sort of groups are provided maybe templates or donation resources to help advance the federal and the national action. And so really it was important for me to help encourage and increase awareness of what local communities are doing around climate change. Because that's where everything happens. That's the real crux of the issue, is to not only help support federal and national and international climate action, but really also at home, where it's actually affecting people's lives.
I think that's such a difficult concept to get through to people, and even through my own head. I mean, this is not a new act local or think global, act local. I don't know when that phrase was coined, but I feel like it took me forever to get it through my head that quit following what's happening at, the COP28 and just go see what's happening down the street at the local garden. That's where it matters. And you feel sometimes like you're doing more grandiose things when, everybody I know flew into this COP28 this year. And I'm thinking, did you really have to go to Dubai, to show up? And some people do, of course, but, it's kind of a lesson for all of us, like all the climate change we're creating by going to climate change meetings when all we have to do is go plant a garden down the street and, think a little bit more about what we do in our own homes.
Absolutely. Not only in our own homes, but our own community. So attending a city council meeting, even just providing information on a lot of these local surveys, really does go to help inform local planning around climate change, and really does help provide that actionable intelligence that is so needed at the local level.
Well, let's pivot a little bit to Michael and find out who you are and why you are capable and interested and so engaged with this very important tool. Can you just talk a little bit first about where you went to school, what you studied, and then what your career has been over these last few years, which haven't been too many because you're not very old.
Thank you. So actually, I'm originally from Florida. Grew up in Sarasota County, which is a coastal county, but I actually grew up a little bit inland in that county. From a very young age, climate and weather disasters were very key to sort of my upbringing. My house there flooded several times.
Really?
That's one of the initial experiences that really affected how I actually pursued graduate school and undergrad and what my programs and focus really became. And so I did go to a very small liberal arts school that has now unfortunately been in the news for political reasons, but New College of Florida in Sarasota, and then continued my graduate studies at Columbia University. And one of the things, particularly at Columbia, that I recognize is kind of getting to our earlier conversation. So many people focus on the international, and there's relatively fewer that were focusing really on domestic policy and how we could actually operationalize the commitments that were being made internationally at a national, state, and even local level. And that's really where I wanted to then focus on advancing that sort of local led climate action.
When you talked about your house flooding when you were younger, was it due to the impacts of climate change or global warming? Or was it unclear at that time, or still unclear, or do you know?
Certainly it was unclear at that time. Obviously, further research might attribute some level of increased. At that time, it was rainfall, but also rainfall associated with tropical storms. But by and large, it's actually a combination of weather factors and potential mismanagement of stormwater systems. And so that's really where it comes into play again. Looking at that local level, we can plan all we want, But at the end of the day, many of these systems are having an opportunity or a tendency for human error. And so when we recognize the impact that climate change is going to have on communities, it's largely going to be localized impacts to underserved, disadvantaged communities. And there's going to be a real need to ensure that our processes at the local government and state government level are able to accommodate the changes that we're going to see, and we're already seeing because of climate change.
What was your master's in? When you said you went to Columbia, which is an incredible school, what did you study? What was your actual master's in? What was the program?
It was a master's of public administration in environmental science and policy.
So when you were studying there, and of course, everybody knows that's one of the most highly rated schools in the country. I'm really curious, did they focus on the local, or is that what you're referring to when you said they more focused on the international?
I would say they provided a lot of flexibility in how we approached what our passion within the constraints of the MPA program were. But by and large, just obviously given the location in New York, near the UN, a lot of what was happening at that time, there was a lot of focus on the international. And that is something that, again, I really did enjoy learning about and working on. But by and large, where it came back to me is recognize the localized impact and the need to work on domestic and then state and local policy around climate change.
When you think about what happens at these COP meetings, they are, they're grandiose and important, as you said, conversations and pacts that we sign and things that leaders agree to. But it doesn't do anything until they come into your own neighborhood and say, here's what we need to do here. So, the connection just has to be made. And I think it has not been made in the past, which is why your project and in this platform, give me a word to use because I keep fumbling around for the right. Would you call it a mission? I may call it a mission because that's really what it is, right?
Well, we are a nonprofit organization, but by and large, I would call the website either just a website or a platform for increasing awareness around climate action.
And so you're a nonprofit, and so how are you getting funding? It's always a good question.
Right now, it's all voluntary led and managed, but we'll see going forward how that actually will work. But we'll have an opportunity for individuals to donate if they wanted to on the website to advance the mission.
Okay. Is that on there yet, or you will have that?
Not as of yet, but all right. Probably by the time this is published.
But you're already a 501c3, or are you?
Correct.
Okay, yep. So you're ready to go, ready to hit the road. That's great. I'm really happy to hear that. And so you must still be. Are you still working at the EPA? Because we didn't talk yet about your work, but are you still working elsewhere?
No. So actually, my primary job is actually with an intergovernment or local government association, working with communities in the southeastern U.S. To advance sustainability and climate action. And my role as Director of Federal Programs is really to help connect them with federal funding to advance their local sustainability and equity and climate goals.
So you worked at the EPA for quite a while, though, right?
Absolutely.
Or did you? Yeah.
6 years.
6 years. And then you were working with local governments, teaching them a little bit, right, about training programs, or what were you doing actually with local governments in your role there?
Yeah, so I had multiple roles at the EPA, but the role that you're mentioning is actually with a small group called the Climate Adaptation Staff within the Office of the Administrator of the EPA. This group, back in the day, towards the tail end of the Obama-Biden administration, was really working on operationalizing a lot of these commitments for increasing climate resiliency in communities. So we were working in conjunction with local government advisory councils to create a training module and a resource center for communities to look at to better understand how to actually incorporate climate resiliency within their local operations. So whether that be how they were running a water utility and how to ensure that they are able to provide those same water services under future climate scenarios, or even looking at everything from urban planning, green infrastructure, stormwater management, you name it, the broad array of different categories that will really be impacted by future climate scenarios.
What kind of surprises me is everything I've read about you, and a lot of what you're saying is focused on climate resiliency. I mean, this is the term and the concept that keeps coming up. And yet, I don't know what percentage of the country and the world is still saying, oh, there is no such thing as climate change. It's just a real disconnect between what you're saying. Local, state and national and international governments have all accepted this a long time ago. I'm not even a question. So I don't know if I asked a question, but what's that disconnect? Is it just a political, point to be made by certain people?
I can't speak for how what is going through some of these politicians' mind when they are recognizing climate resiliency, but not necessarily recognizing climate mitigation needs. But by and large, I will say that resiliency has gotten a lot more awareness recently because of all these different 10-year, 100-year storms that we're realizing across the country and the effect that it has on communities. And so whether you're looking at the state level or the local level, or again, the national level, there's really a renewed sense that we have to prepare communities, because in many ways, communities are already struggling to account for current climate scenarios. But once you incorporate future projections, you're realizing that that's really going to have a negative impact on a lot of communities. And there will be tough decisions that will need to be made about how you best prepare these communities for those future projections, and ensuring that there's equity in that how those programs are undertaken. But yeah, so I definitely have focused on climate resiliency for quite a while, and that has been sort of my inroad into this work. But that's, again, not to take away in any way from the need to mitigate future climate change.
Would you explain the difference to listeners between mitigation and resiliency?
Absolutely. So climate mitigation really means trying to reduce the source of emissions that will exacerbate climate change. So you're really looking at attempts to mitigate greenhouse gas emissions. Climate resiliency is a broader term meant to really focus on the impacts from either current scenarios or adaptation, which really looks to see how you prepare for future scenarios. So it's really looking at two sides of the same sort of climate action coin, but approaching from different perspectives, but recognizing that when you're looking at climate mitigation, you're looking at local sources that do contribute to national or international climate change. But when you're looking at resiliency, you're really looking at localized conditions that are affecting your neighborhood and your community.
Okay, that helps a lot, actually. Well, you mentioned something a few minutes ago about, you didn't use the word climate justice, but I think you were referring to it, what are the effects upon different areas, just say locally, different neighborhoods will have different experience of the impact of climate change. Just this is from going through the website, I can tell different references that you had really were inclusive of the idea of climate justice, which maybe you could explain put that into words for anyone who maybe doesn't understand what climate justice actually means, what it looks like in cities and towns.
Absolutely. So when we're talking about climate justice, we're really looking to see that, as we know, climate change is going to have a whole host of negative implications for communities across the country or internationally. However, when you're incorporating climate justice, you're really looking to see how there's going to be communities that are already burdened that are going to experience even disproportionate levels of additional burden because of climate change. So it's really looking at to see those communities that might be currently underinvested and might already be dealing with stormwater management problems. But yet, when you look 5-10 years in the future, and there's going to be even stronger rainstorms, all of a sudden that community that's already flooding potentially on a monthly basis already is then going to be experiencing that flooding on an even greater number of times. So when you're looking at climate justice, you're really trying to predominantly look at it in a way that you're ensuring that the communities that are already overburdened are receiving the benefits and receiving equitable investment in the solutions to climate change.
It's not exclusively communities that are already marginalized, but it typically is, right? Was that a fair statement?
It typically is, but you're absolutely right. There's we've seen with climate change already and threats posed from sea level rise, coastal erosion, that there are going to be impacts on communities of all income level. However, even when it's the impact is, say, on a community that might have an existing higher income level, that's probably potentially going to lead to greater gentrification of communities that are at the low to moderate income level. So we recognize that even when these threats may be experienced by individuals who are already privileged, there's still going to be a lot of impact on those that are already overburdened.
Yeah, I guess I'm curious about, you're right, because you could have like a very upscale, seaside town where everyone there might be mega mansions right on the beach, and they're just getting pummeled by climate change. It's going to hurt everybody. But I think that the genesis of the term climate justice may have come from the fact that places that are already struggling with getting enough resources are, maybe they're getting more pollution in their neighborhoods because of factories and so forth, that they are sometimes struggling more and getting fewer resources. And so what's already there is just being exacerbated, right, by something that's affecting all of us.
Exactly. And even in your example that you used about, like, say, a barrier island community that is probably higher income, really receiving a disproportionate burden from sea level rise, those individuals who in many cases will have a level of affluence to be able to facilitate them moving inland are predominantly going to be moving into the areas and gentrifying areas that might be those overburdened communities.
Well, I guess the upshot is that maybe services will go up, but then so do prices, right? So it's a sort of a circular issue. Let's. I do want to turn to Climate Herald and really spend the bulk of our time talking about the website and the benefits from it. So, first, are there any other similar platforms out there? Because I'm not aware of any.
There's certainly platforms that try to replicate some level or include some elements of what I include. But there's a reason that I actually focus on providing a platform that was really updated on a day-to-day basis. The reason is the existing platforms that I'm aware of traditionally look at anything from voluntary reporting to maybe looking at an annual survey to inform what's on the website. The downside is exactly. The downside is that you're going to get sort of information that the community might want to see presented. So it's going to be largely biased information.
Right.
And it's also not necessarily timely. And so that's where I really feel Climate Herald stands out, because the work that we do is really focused on updating on a day-to-day basis what's happening. And so you can look at it today and see what's happening in Contra Costa County, California, and their climate action plan open house. But maybe by the time this is published, you'll see information about Allegheny County, Pennsylvania's upcoming climate action plan. So it's really timely and up to date. And you're able to look to see what's happening not only in these larger communities that we all recognize for their effort on climate change, but by and large, the smaller communities that so often go unnoticed for their contributions.
And even people in the smaller communities are completely unaware sometimes of all the things that are happening in their communities at the government level, or, whether it's local or whatever. And so it's really, and I'll tell you, I just learned so much just about my own community just with a few minutes on the site. But I'm trying to think, I know it's only been live for a month now, but have you heard feedback and have you heard of any experiences that people have, had so far?
Absolutely. On a daily basis, I'm getting emails through the contact on the website from local community-based organizations. First of all, making sure that I'm recognizing them for their efforts at the local level, but also identifying where I might be missing some context on that local action. And so they're constantly giving me tips on what might be coming down the line, and then ensuring that that information is on the site as well. Because at the end of the day, what is happening and what you see on one of the pages for local community was largely driven by a lot of these local climate advocates. So really want to ensure that they're recognized on the site as well.
Recognized, and also just so that people are aware of what they're doing, because everyone needs volunteers, everyone needs donations, everyone needs people to take action, because after all, that's why they started their organization, whatever it is, to encourage people to take action. So, but what are these logistics of keeping this up to date? And that has to be massive. And how are you even doing it? You have a staff of what, 4? Or, 4, not staff, but like you're all volunteer.
Yeah, so we do have a board consisting of 3 individuals. By and large, keeping it up to date. That's one of the great things about the tracking system that I really focus on, is that once you start tracking, you start to recognize not only the patterns, but it's a lot easier to keep up to date, because you start seeing in an agenda a month ago saying that, oh, this such and such document will come before council in 2 to 3 months. And so it's really one of the key areas is just bring it first to fruition. And then from now, it's really just keeping it up to date on a day-to-day basis. But it's something I do on my own time and on the weekends.
I don't see how that's possible. The number of locations that, I mean, it's just, I thought it was all AI or something. I can't believe this is human powered.
Absolutely. So I do use what I would call sort of off-the-shelf AI. However, really what you see before you, I would say, if anything, is more of a proof of concept, by and large, because we're looking at incorporating more fully artificial intelligence in this work going forward. And so we really hope to launch a version 2, I would say, by the end of the year, that will more fully utilize machine learning and artificial intelligence to increase the opportunity for communities to not only look to see what has been done, but also more thoroughly assess existing climate action plans and documents.
But how many cities and counties, and because I looked just at my own state of Colorado and then into my city, and there's a lot of cities just within our state, and it's also Canada as well, right?
Absolutely. So it does include not only U.S. But Canadian cities and counties. Currently, right now, just under 1,300 communities, and that is growing every day as well. So it won't be long before we hit 1,300.
So, okay, sorry to belabor this point. So you literally would go to every city. So my city's Denver. So you would go into Denver. You'd go look at all the different organizations that are active in Denver. Is that how you do it? And then government? What's the process?
So that's a great question. By and large, utilizing 2 different frameworks. One, active tracking of city council and relevant committee agendas. So, as well as press releases. Basically, whenever a local government might be undertaking action, due to transparency laws, they will likely need to advertise that action anywhere from 72 hours to maybe 2 weeks in advance. It's reviewing those documents once they're posted, as well as using a media monitoring service to identify areas that I may have missed. So that includes particularly the smaller communities where the requirement to advertise 72 hours in advance might not necessarily be as strongly adhered to, or it's oftentimes to identify the areas that have been sort of lost in the analysis of the document. And this is really, again, where the community-based organizations do come into play strongly as well, is that they recognize sometimes when a local government might be framing a certain action, but that action actually kind of, the title of that action does not necessarily belay what the actual intent is, or the likely
effect. Is it greenwashing, or is it something even more nefarious?
Greenwashing, or sometimes amending existing requirements that will fundamentally take away from the ability to advance climate action.
Have you been surprised as you've gone through, especially as you were setting this up, because there was so much background information? Because, for example, in the area that I searched, the 3 organizations that came up were national organizations. So I'm not sure if I looked exactly the right place, but as you went through every city and set this all up, were you surprised at how much is out there in terms
Absolutely.
of resources for people that are concerned about the climate change? And
absolutely. So not only was I surprised at just how many different community-based organizations there are that are advocating for climate action, but I was honestly also very surprised at the level of climate action from cities across the country. I feel so often we're brought into this perception that it's only the large cities that are acting on climate change. It's the cities like Denver, it's the cities like Chicago, Seattle, or New York.
right.
But by and large, communities of all shapes and sizes from across the country in states that are oftentimes overlooked are undertaking significant action on climate change. And that's really where I wanted to highlight to increase awareness of the great work that's being done, by and large, driven also by community-based organizations.
I'm wondering if I feel like we need to bring this down to the individual level a little bit more and make it a little bit more tangible for people, because a lot of people who know nothing, and I'm actually surprised by how little most people do actually know. I had an experience this week with my own family member who's very educated in all kinds of things, and was unaware that, for example, putting food into a landfill creates methane, which contributes so powerfully to climate change. And to me, I thought that was just a priori. I thought everybody knew that, and it's a pretty basic fact that's been out there for a very long time. It's not. There's so many basics that are unknown. People are still trying to figure out, do I recycle this or that? And that tends to take up all the energy when so much, or it's should I buy an electric car? Should I buy a plug-in hybrid? Those are really where I feel like I hear the conversations, and maybe straws and a little bit about plastic or PFAS. There is a lot of information for everybody to learn, and you want to make it so that it hits home. They're very concerned about their children, their grandchildren, their own lives, and what do they do? Because this all is a little bit, still doesn't feel touchy-feely enough for me yet. So I kind of want to change our conversation just a little bit for a few minutes to focus more on average Joe in the average house. What can they do, and how will this help them, this tool?
Absolutely. So I recognize at the end of the day, many residents don't have the hours to go to a city council, county commission meeting. Those can often last 8 hours or longer. And the idea of going to sit in there only to really hear about one topic that might be of interest to you, it's not practical for anyone that is not part of an organization that might be doing this as a core element of their work. And so I really want to provide this as a resource so that residents, no matter where you're located, you can go and check to see what your community is doing. Moreover, not only seeing what your community is doing, but your neighborhood or a neighboring community might be doing. So, Deborah, if I can use you as an example. Obviously, you mentioned living in Denver. Denver's long been known for the great work being done on climate change. But what might be interesting to you is to know is that, Boulder County has also been doing some amazing work. Breckenridge, even Aurora, Colorado. And that's really where we want to provide that information so that residents can actually look to see what's happening more broadly in their community and recognize how they can get involved.
Yeah, because that's really the key of this, right? That's the nut of the whole thing, is how do we get more people educated and involved? And I could see this tool being very effective for lessons at high school level, even grade school, grammar school level, let alone college, because people need these tangible tools like this. And so I'll give you an example of what my experience was, because I told you it's a very friendly, non-intimidating website, which I really appreciate that you did. Because sometimes you'll go on like a government website and you just, you don't even want to spend 5 seconds on it. The user interface is not the strong part. So everything about it just feels very approachable. So, I appreciated that. So I just literally put in my zip code. It's not that much to confuse one on there. I just put on my zip code. Might have put in my city. I can't remember. I think I did it a couple different ways. And it brought up Citizens Climate Lobby, which I was already aware of. But listen, that's good, because I hadn't signed up with them, and I just wrote them and made it very easy to contact them. There's a link to contact them. I went on there. There's a link to sign up for joining. And within half an hour, I had so much information at my fingertips, because they're providing local information. Even if it's a larger organization, they were very localized. They had already set me up with a password and a username to go on their forum, and said that the person was, the administrator knew I was coming and would be expecting me. It's very, very well done, I have to say. And then just listen, all kinds of information more about what's happening locally, where to go volunteer, where to learn more. And this is all, I'm not exaggerating, within 5 minutes. So it's very non-intimidating. And, it's something that I've been meaning to do for a long time, but I really haven't known where to start. And then there were two other organizations on. It was like 350.org, which is also not, I think it's not just national, but international, which is a focus more on fossil fuel use and phasing that out. And then there was another one on, I'll have to see if I have the name here, Colorado People's Alliance, which is much more focused on, what's the word I'm looking for? Climate justice, and what neighborhoods and what's happening in different neighborhoods around the issues of climate justice. So depending on what you want to pursue, it was just so easy. And I just felt very appreciative, because I've been stuck for a long time. It already moved me a little bit off the,
Well, I really appreciate that, because as you point out, we do actually link to local chapters for these national or international organizations.
Right.
So
right.
It's not just sending someone to the regular citizensclimatelablobby.org or 350.org, but rather the chapter that is specific to that community. So whether it's the Denver chapter, or if you're located elsewhere in the U.S., it might be a county, might be even a regional chapter, but really just trying to provide links to those that are advocating or involved in climate advocacy at the local level. But by and large, the website, I think, also stands by itself in providing the information around what a community has done on climate change, so that when you do look at how to be involved, or what organization you want to get involved, you have a better sense of what your community is doing and has done on climate change.
You just made me think of something with that, what you just said, because one of the things, like the Surgeon General said, the biggest problem in America right now, the number one health problem, is isolation and loneliness. Living out, that's our number one health challenge. So I've seen this through everywhere, podcasts, everywhere. I see this discussion of how can we build our communities? How can you make people feel connected to their community? And this is such a good way for people to connect. If you move to a new city and you want to meet people, you're interested in climate, they're interested in, protecting the environment. It's a great way to connect. And that's what we need. So it does solve. I always like, Paul Hawken wrote the book. He wrote a couple of books. Well, he's written a million books, but I don't know if it was Regeneration or the one before that. I can't remember. It's 100 Ways to Prevent Climate Change or something. I'm sorry, I'm messing up the title. If you know it, correct me. But in that book, he talks about things that improve the environment, and then he talks about like a one step you might take, and then all the cascading benefits that come that are unintended. And I think that's kind of true for your website, that here's what it is to inform people about climate change, but also here's some ways that you can meet people in your own neighborhood and that are like-minded and work on projects together. So it really has a lot of benefits.
Absolutely. I really appreciate that. And that's really, again, the key element here is that I've been asked before whether I intend for this to have their own chapters or anything like that, but there's no need. There's already so many organizations out there that really just want to provide a central resource that could help connect communities and connect people to those existing community-based organizations. So again, not only providing that overview of what a community has done, but then providing that offshoot to better connect with like-minded individuals at the local level.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's spreading the whole interest organically, which has not really, there's no human, it's just the disconnect between scientists and journalists and just people on the ground. I think this might be where we've been stuck for so long. We're just not bringing it into the home, specifically into everybody's homes.
I couldn't agree more. I mean, I think there is largely an information gap, and something that not only is evident for residents of the community, but even for the local government and local government staff themselves. When they're trying to undertake a lot of these policies, there's oftentimes a desire. One of the first sort of questions that electeds will usually pose to the staff is, okay, who else has done this policy? And so there's oftentimes a need to connect with localities across their state, across their region, to provide those examples. Because let's face it, even in communities in Colorado, Denver is never going to be the best example. If you're Durango, you might want to know what Summit County is doing. You might want to know what other communities have done in addition to Denver or in addition to Boulder. But really being able to provide that connection does foster a sense of community among local government staff as well.
That's huge. That's a point I really hadn't thought about. And often like the cities and the small and the rural areas are so disconnected. And, this is just one way because there are things that you can only do as a state with funding as a state or with cooperation with all the different cities, and to know what people are doing and think of all the time that would save government staffs. I'm going to mention this. My daughter works for the local or state of Colorado, so I will definitely pass it on to her to pass on.
Sounds great. Thank you.
Yeah. When you think about this must be really gratifying to have created this, because is this something that was kind of eating at you for a while, that there was no way to get this information? Is that what started it?
Very much so. I mean, going back to my days at the EPA, I was creating climate adaptation training. And one of the key things that we always wanted to do is provide examples that resonated with communities across the country. And by and large, that was not always going to be the Chicago, Seattle, Denvers of the world, but rather the smaller to mid-sized counties and cities. And unfortunately, what oftentimes frustrated me is there wasn't great data available at that time. And so that really influenced and inspired me to, during obviously the pandemic and when I had a bit of extra time, really focus on how to actually create this myself. And that was something that, again, I'm really happy to see it now come to fruition and see communities, not only community-based organizations, but local governments across the country actually utilizing it to advance further climate action.
So there's a big emotional piece for you on this, huh? I mean, it seems like I hear that coming through. It's kind of like a person talking about their kids, and watching them grow up and go out into the world, and people are responding to them. And kind of your baby.
Absolutely. It was, for the longest time, just a passion project of mine that was always sort of internal, but to actually now see it launched and to see it being utilized is just so rewarding.
Yeah. I mean, that's what everybody wants, right? Is to make a difference in the world, and to see that it's just, I mean, you've been doing it anyway, but to make it like a completely unique creation of your own, it's really, I feel like kind of reiterating a point, but for people to feel this at an emotional level, I think is important, because that tends to be what drives people, and you don't want fear to be the thing that drives people. You want a different kind of emotion.
Absolutely. I mean, what you see when you look at the approximately 1,300 communities is you see hope. You see communities
Exactly.
from population of 45 to a couple million actually taking action on climate change, recognizing that there is something that they can do and they are making a difference. So really, I do view it as hope for the future and sort of combating that perception that, oh, only some communities can act on climate change. No, there's just under 1,300 here at the moment that have taken action, and there's infinite opportunities to scale. There's relatively around 30,000 local community organizations, according to the National League of Cities, across the country. And that's not even to talk about the international opportunities for scaling this work.
Well, which is one of my questions. We're now you've got the United States. Are you going to, and Canada, are you going to try to more fully, is your next step to more fully populate that database, and do you think you'll ever go on to international inclusion?
So there's definitely two ways in which I'm considering scaling this. First, as I sort of mentioned, there right now approximately 1,300 communities, but there's upwards of 30,000 governmental units across just U.S. And so there's certainly going to be ones that I have not factored in or accounted for yet. Some of those are going to be on the more regional scale. Some might be sort of special districts or sort of like neighborhood units of a local government. But there's still room to scale and increase the amount that I'm actively tracking and including on the website. But there's also real opportunity to scale internationally. And that's really where I'm looking at where can I actually provide that same level of timely data to help, again, ensure residents are aware of what that community is doing. So there are certainly some countries that I've already looked at and that I'm already, in some sense, tracking that I could certainly see being incorporated in that next phase or next version of the website. And
you don't really need to connect with each one. You can kind of just pick anything you want, right? If you're just getting general information that's not, there's nothing private about it. It's publicly aware, publicly provided information, right?
Absolutely. So all of the information that you see on the website is publicly accessible data. It's all from city council agendas, press releases, resolutions, ordinances, and the like. And so all of that is information that, again, one to ensure is provided in a timely manner. And so it's really just the element of that tracking that requires sort of being connected with that community and how that community sort of uploads their agendas, how they really distribute information to their population.
Right. Which kind of gives me the thought that when you think about, let's say, the Paris Climate Agreement, where every nation agreed to certain protocol, and then, and you can see, like, you can go on, again, I went to Denver, and you can see that there's a commitment of 80% reduction in greenhouse gas emissions by 2050. Like, that's a commitment that we made. So you can see that it has filtered down from the agreement that the U.S. made and then to the state and then to the cities, and how that's actually showing up. But to me, it seems like a really good tool to show, especially if this were taken worldwide, what is happening on the island of Tuvalu, and what is happening in China, and what is happening in West Africa. Are those commitments going down? Because when you can look at a city council meeting or agenda or something like that, there is proof that people are actually meeting those, or at least working on meeting those commitments. But if you look at a country, there's nothing being done or very little. It's like, hey, words don't get us there.
Absolutely. So that's certainly the hope for this website, that it does go to help inform national reporting for these countries, because to my knowledge, there's not been great assessments and tracking done at the local level. And as you point out, these are just commitments. So the proof is in the pudding as to how they actually will implement these commitments. But by and large, it's still valuable to have, because we want to recognize when communities are meeting those commitments, but also remind them when they aren't.
Yeah. And honestly, because this is such a dire situation, it is important that people know what countries aren't rather than with their voluntary reporting. I mean, there has to be, and I'm sure there's a lot of other ways that things are being tracked, like you have to show, you have to prove things, but sometimes it's these more anecdotal almost pieces of information that tell the true story. So, if you're a local reporter and you want to go see what's happening, how your county is showing up, it's a good way to do it.
Absolutely. And that's definitely something that I factored into the design of this website, is that recognizing that there's so much great work being done by local journalists, but also recognizing that local journalism right now is already in a state where it's being challenged. And so using this as an opportunity to help a local City Hall beat reporter recognize that when, say, maybe a climate emergency resolution is coming before that council, they could easily look to this website to better understand, okay, what has been done either at the state level or nationally for this type of resolution. So they can really easily utilize it as a tool to help better inform their reporting, but also recognizing that really looking for that connection to help, again, just increase awareness and context around a lot of these local government actions.
How, just to make it even a little bit more personal, for example, your own family, your own community, have you, I'm sure you've introduced this to friends and family and neighbors or whomever that were coworkers. Has there been a favorable response and are people using it that you're hearing?
Absolutely. I have family not only through the Southeast U.S., but throughout Cincinnati and elsewhere across the country. And it's amazing seeing sort of the reaction that they have to this information and just how it's helped to better inform them of what's happening in their own community that they might not have recognized before.
Yeah.
So been really excited
know what you're doing now too. Oh, now we know what you've been doing all these years. You have a question and answer question, I don't know what it's called, but anyway, a segment on your website where you answer specific questions. One of them was specific to Native peoples in the United States and how they are not being included in this. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Absolutely. I wanted to make sure that it was a conscious decision that even though I could collect data on them, that the real question then becomes, did I want to reproduce that data? And the answer was no, because at the end of the day, while tribal nations have done quite a bit and are innovative leaders on climate action, it was not appropriate for me to be reproducing their data without their consulting
permission, basically.
permission.
That's the word we're both looking for.
Absolutely.
There's a word that starts with the C that we're both looking for anyway, without their... Go ahead.
Certainly without consulting. I did not want to reproduce that information without consulting them. So again, I wanted to be very clear, as you point out on the frequently asked questions, that it was not that they were forgotten or in any way not included, but rather that I wanted to recognize that I was not going to be the best source of information and that this website was not going to be the best source of information on their activities. So I did also want to ensure that I included a link to more appropriate sources of information, which would be the Institute for Tribal Environmental Professionals and the Bureau of Indian Affairs Climate Resiliency and Climate Action websites.
Why, though, would they be different than any other community in terms of the opportunity to use that data if it's already publicly published?
It's a great question. Due to the governmental nature of tribal nations and how they're recognized in the U.S. and Canada, there's certainly differences in the way in which their information should be published. And I'll say that even with the data that is oftentimes available, which might come from reports that they've provided to, say, EPA or federal agencies, even though those are public, again, it might very well include information that tribal nation or Alaska Native Corporation would not necessarily want publicized. That might include specific sites of importance, data that includes traditional ecological knowledge. By and large, I didn't feel it was appropriate for this website to be reproducing that data without really consulting them first. But should, again, this grow, that would also be a natural area for extension where I'd really want to highlight their efforts, but again, done in consultation and with their permission.
Well, because as you alluded to, and I'm not sure how you phrased it, they really are, indigenous peoples really are the ones who have the most ancient ways of protecting the earth and are still more in touch with their connection to the earth and how to protect it. And it's always been at the forefront of their existence, even, that they're one with the earth. And so I could see how it could use a special treatment just because of that. But on the other hand, facts are facts. So, it's probably be helpful for people to know about that as well. So, that would be something that if it were allowed, that would be interesting, I think, for people to know. So yeah, you're gonna, do you see this at some point of becoming a standalone organization where this is your full-time gig and because it just feels like the potential, you don't want to overload a site with more and more data if it's not relevant. So I guess where it goes next is really something you have to think carefully about. But, what is your vision for the future?
Absolutely. That's a great question. This certainly could be something that becomes what I do in the future as primary work. But for now, I'm really comfortable where I'm at. I love being able to manage this on my own time. But I'm really excited also for version 2. Version 2 is really where it's going to provide a lot more insight into the actual plans, resolutions, ordinances, and other information. One of the reasons why, if you go on the website now, you see sort of a snapshot of that community, whatever community you might be looking for, but you don't necessarily get the connection to the underlying source data. The reason is I didn't want to be in a position where I was providing links that might end up becoming broken at a later point.
Right.
Everyone hates those 404 notices that they get. So really, all of this data was collected and right now is being stored in a repository, but that we are looking to actually tie in with the website itself. And that will really allow for communities to be able to actually go more in depth on these plans. They'll actually be able to see the plans, and using artificial intelligence and other machine learning algorithms, you'll also be able to look more in depth on these actions. So, Deborah, I know one thing that's really key to you and a lot of your work has been around refugees and immigration. And so one thing I just quickly searched through the database to see that Aurora, Colorado, that in their energy action plan, they specifically call out refugee and immigration populations and how they can work with the local government office there to better increase energy efficiency and energy opportunities for those communities. So it's really being able to look more in depth at the underlying source information that I'm really excited about in version 2.
Wow, that is such a way to personalize it for people, because you're right. And I appreciate you noticing that and pointing that out. Aurora is one that has more refugees and more represent the number of languages spoken in Aurora, which is now actually a really big city, is just it's thousands and thousands of languages are spoken there. Like, it's not in the hundreds. They will have different sensibilities and different interests and different things that are important. So that's really helpful information. Of course, now I'm going to go look at it. And it kind of brings me maybe to a closing question, which is about, for individuals who are motivated, first of all, you do have to make it particular to you. You have to make it, in order to get excited or want to pursue anything, it has to have some personal resonance with you, and if you've had children, grandchildren, definitely that resonates to a lot of people, but most people, bulk of the population, are still younger than that, and so it's more, you have to find your why that you want to go on and look. And And I think that was just a really good example that you just gave. Something that's important to me, in addition to climate change, are refugees, and to link those two together makes it more personal for me. So when you're talking about an individual who is motivated maybe by this conversation and by your website, and they want to contribute to their own community's climate efforts, I guess, like what kind of specific actionable steps would you recommend to them, and like how can they just start acting at any age? There's a lot of retired people who want to do the same thing. So for anybody.
Oh, I absolutely agree. So when it comes to just the simple sort of actions you can do at a local level, one, get connected with those community-based organizations. As you heard from Deborah, like just reaching out and joining some of their listservs really does provide opportunities to be engaged through those organizations and help support them in their work. But particularly at the local government level, there's so much opportunity. I mentioned before, it's one thing to go in front of a city council and say, speak either for or against a certain bill or action. That takes a lot of guts. It's oftentimes very imposing to people. But when you're looking at other options to really engage in civic participation, you can help inform a survey. So many of these local governments push out surveys to help inform their planning efforts. Simply responding to a survey makes sure that your voice is heard. Also, attend some of these volunteer events, whether it be a local a forest planting or a cleanup initiative. That really does have actual ramifications for helping to ensure that you have clean and healthy neighborhoods. So there are numerous ways you can be involved. And I would say look to the website because we keep it up to date on a daily basis and highlights several of these different opportunities for your community.
No, that was really helpful, actually. And again, just to stress that community building, you want to make friends, you want to get to know your neighbors, you want to just build community. It's a tremendous way to do it. Very, very easily, locally, free, just like-minded people. So I appreciate your efforts so much. I truly do. I think it's way bigger than the sum of its parts, and I think the impact will be massive. You just barely, this is a month old, and already I can tell the impact is big. So maybe we can talk again in a year and see what's happened. Maybe after 2.0 comes out and kind of take a new fresh look at it.
I'd love that.
Thank you for what you're doing for all of us, for the planet, and just keep going. And I'm sure you make a lot of people proud with your efforts in addition to so.
Thank you very much.
Right. Thank you, Michael. Take care.
Great talking with you.
Right. You too. Bye-bye.
Bye.